To understand the journey of Philip Pirrip, better known as Pip, we have to start in the desolate, freezing mist of the Kent marshes. It is Christmas Eve, 1812. 7-year-old Pip is visiting the graves of his parents when a terrified, escaped convict lunges from behind a tombstone and violently grabs him. The convict threatens to kill Pip unless the boy brings him food and a metal file. Pip obeys, stealing a pork pie and a file from his own home, but the act brands his childhood with a deep, lingering sense of guilt. He believes he is now an accessory to the criminal underworld. That harsh reality stands in sharp contrast to the warm, glowing safety of Pip's home. He is apprenticed to the village blacksmith, Joe Gargery. Joe is unrefined and entirely uneducated, but he is fiercely protective of Pip. He works with his hands, deals honestly with his neighbors, and serves as the unwavering moral anchor of Pip's early life. In these early years, Pip's entire universe is defined by common labor and simple, straightforward morality. The very concept of aristocratic wealth is completely alien to him. That isolation ends when Pip is summoned to Satis House, a decaying local mansion. Inside, the house is a Gothic nightmare. The clocks are stopped at 20 minutes to 9, daylight is boarded up, and the eccentric owner, Miss Havisham, sits eternally rotting inside the yellowed wedding dress from the day she was jilted. Here, Pip meets Miss Havisham's adopted daughter, Estella. She is beautiful, cruel, and relentlessly mocks Pip for his thick boots and rough working-class hands. For the first time in his life, Pip feels deeply ashamed of who he is. That shame carves out a hollow space inside him. The contentment of the forge is erased, replaced entirely by an obsessive, consuming desire to become a wealthy, polished gentleman. This sets the structure for a Bildungsroman, a literary term for a coming-of-age story that tracks the psychological and moral growth of a protagonist from youth to adulthood. Dickens uses this framework to map a collision course between Pip's innocent origins and Victorian social climbing. Satis House plants a fatal illusion in Pip's mind. He believes that achieving the great expectation of high social mobility is the only way he will ever be worthy of Estella's love. When an anonymous benefactor finally provides the money for Pip to move to London, the city shatters his soft, white fantasies. The actual metropolis is suffocating, packed with heavy litter, soot, and filth. His guardian in the city is Mr. Jaggers, a ruthless defense attorney. Jaggers operates in the shadow of the gallows, managing a lucrative practice built entirely on murderers, thieves, and the desperate inmates of Newgate Prison. Despite the grim reality surrounding his money, Pip rapidly adopts the airs of an idle aristocrat. He hires a servant, runs up massive debts, and when Joe Gargery travels to London to visit him, Pip is actively embarrassed by the blacksmith's clumsy manners and poor grammar. Pip has completely absorbed the Victorian era's definition of gentility. Being a gentleman has absolutely nothing to do with personal character or kindness. It is strictly a calculation of birth, tailored clothing, and passive wealth. Charles Dickens wrote this critique during his own intense midlife crisis. In the late 1850s, his marriage had disintegrated, he was burning his personal correspondence, and he was deeply cynical about the superficiality of the high society he had fought so hard to enter. Through Pip, Dickens illustrates a hollow victory. The young man's pursuit of elite status has built a moral prison, alienating him from those who truly cared for him. At the age of 23, during a violent, stormy night in London, Pip hears a heavy footstep on the stairs. His anonymous patron has finally come to claim him. The man who enters is not an agent of Miss Havisham. It is Abel Magwitch, the escaped convict Pip fed in the graveyard 16 years earlier. Transported to Australia, Magwitch amassed a fortune through grueling labor. He smuggled that wealth back to England specifically to buy Pip a life of luxury. Pip is utterly repulsed. In an instant, his entire worldview collapses. He realizes Miss Havisham never intended for him to marry Estella, and that his grand aristocratic life is a complete fiction. Worse, he must acknowledge that the exact criminal underworld he tried to escape has been secretly paying for his tailored clothes and fine dining. The Great Expectation was a mirage. Dickens strips the veneer off high society to show that vast Victorian wealth often grows from dark, invisible roots in the colonies and the slums. Magwitch is facing the death penalty just by returning to England, but as Pip works to hide him, his disgust slowly turns to deep empathy. He sees the genuine, fatherly devotion this hardened convict holds for him. This leads to a desperate, high-stakes escape attempt down the Thames River, trying to row Magwitch out to a steamer bound for the continent. The plan fails. They are intercepted by the police and Compeyson, a rival fraudster. In a chaotic struggle in the water, Compeyson drowns, and Magwitch is severely injured and captured by the authorities. The rest of Pip's world rapidly burns down. Miss Havisham accidentally sets her wedding dress on fire and dies from her injuries, while Magwitch's fortune is immediately seized by the Crown, leaving Pip penniless. Sick, heavily in debt, and facing arrest himself, Pip has nowhere left to go. He finally returns to the forge, where Joe Gargery silently pays off his debts and nurses him back to health. Losing everything becomes the catalyst for Pip's moral salvation. Stripped of his false status, he finally embraces honest, meaningful work as a clerk, rebuilding his life on actual substance rather than illusion. Dickens originally wrote a bleak ending, where Pip and Estella remain permanently separated. But after complaints, Dickens rewrote it to offer hope. In this revised version, Pip walks through the moonlit ruins of Satis House. He finds Estella, now a widow, who tells him an abusive marriage has broken her pride and opened her heart. As they walk out of the ruined Gordon, Pip narrates, "I saw no shadow of another parting from her." It is an ambiguous line, leaving readers to decide if they marry or simply part as equals who have survived their traumas. Either way, the boy who desperately wanted to be a gentleman finally understands what the word actually means. It requires stripping away the Victorian obsession with birth and bank accounts and replacing it with humility. Pip realizes that the only true gentleman he ever knew was the man swinging the hammer at the village forge, Joe Gargery. Great Expectations leaves us with a quiet but enduring truth. Human dignity is never found in rising above your origins, but in the integrity and grace with which you treat the people beside you.